You are not suffering because life is difficult, but because your mind refuses to stop arguing with it. If you are ready to stop handing your peace to every thought that enters your head, stay here and learn how discipline of judgment changes everything you experience. This is not inspiration. This is training in how to govern your inner world with reason, restraint, and honesty. Each lesson will show how uncontrolled thinking quietly shapes your reactions, your choices, and your days. If you value this kind of direct Stoic discipline, subscribe and stay with this work. This is a space for people who want to examine themselves clearly, not escape themselves. Now begin with full attention, because what follows will challenge the way you use your own mind every day. Number 1. Master your mind. Master life. Stop listening to the part of yourself that begs for comfort and calls it wisdom. Stop obeying every mood as if it were a command from heaven. Stop treating your mind like a place you are trapped inside. Your mind is not your tyrant unless you allow it to become one. You are not defeated because life is hard. You are defeated when your own judgment becomes weak, when you hand your peace to every passing impression, when you let the outside world drag your soul by the collar. The beginning of a disciplined life is not found in changing the world. It is found in learning to govern the one thing that belongs to you, your ruling mind, your judgment, your choice, your assent, your refusal. Everything else may be taken, delayed, distorted, opposed, or denied. But no one can force you to think without your permission. No one can compel your inner agreement unless you surrender it. This is where your freedom begins, and this is where your responsibility begins. You have spent too long reacting as if reaction were inevitability. It is not. It is habit. It is weakness repeated until it feels natural. A harsh word arrives, and your face tightens. A memory returns, and your mood collapses. A future possibility appears, and suddenly you are living in fear of what has not happened. A person disappoints you, and you become a judge of the universe. A delay, a mistake, a loss, an insult, a silence, a rejection, a bill, a headache, a glance, a rumor, a failure, and your mind rushes like an undisciplined horse. You call that being human. But being human does not mean being ruled by every impulse that rises in the chest. Being human means being capable of reason. Being human means you can see an impression and examine it before you accept it. Being human means you can say, "This is only an appearance, it is not yet the truth. Let me judge it well before I let it govern me." That pause is not weakness. That pause is where your dignity lives. The mind becomes masterless when it forgets what is truly its own. People spend their lives guarding possessions, reputations, relationships, and comforts as if these were the foundation of their being. They are not. They are external things, useful perhaps, preferred sometimes, but never sovereign. Your body can be injured, your plans interrupted, your name misunderstood, your efforts ignored, your comforts removed. None of this has to destroy you unless you have tied your entire self to what lies outside your command. The man who thinks his life depends on public praise will live like a slave to applause. The woman who thinks her peace depends on being understood will suffer each time she is misread. The person who thinks success itself is good will tremble before failure. But Stoic life begins when you recognize this simple truth. Virtue is the only true good, and virtue is not a reward from outside. It is an act of the soul. It is how you use your mind, how you choose, how you endure, how you speak, how you withhold anger, how you refuse cowardice, how you keep your word, how you stand upright in difficulty. To master your mind is not to silence every thought by force. It is to train judgment so that thoughts no longer command you simply because they appear. A foolish mind sees a thought and kneels before it. A disciplined mind sees a thought and asks whether it is just, whether it is useful, whether it is in agreement with nature and reason. Most suffering begins at the moment a false judgment is accepted. The event itself is often small. The story you tell yourself about it is what wounds you. You are cut by the insult only when you decide the insult reveals your worth. You are tormented by fear only when you decide the future already contains your ruin. You are consumed by envy only when you decide another person's possession has stolen something from you. The event is one thing. The judgment is another. The event reaches the body. The judgment reaches the soul. Guard the soul. Start there then. Guard the entrance. Do not let every impression enter unchallenged. The first discipline of the day is not speech, it is scrutiny. When you wake, do not rush into the noise of the world as though the world has authority over your mind. Before you reach for distractions, before you feed on other people's opinions, before you allow the day to seize you, sit still for a moment and ask what kind of person you intend to be. Not what kind of day you hope to have, not what kind of praise you hope to receive. Ask what kind of character you intend to practice. Ask whether you will meet difficulty with complaint or with composure. Ask whether you will demand comfort or accept duty. Ask whether you will waste the morning in hesitation or begin immediately with the work that is yours to do. This is not a ritual for appearance. It is the beginning of command. And because your mind is not trained by wishes but by repetition, you must rehearse the hard truths before they strike. Tell yourself in advance that today you may encounter rudeness, delay, misunderstanding, jealousy, incompetence, vanity, and your own weakness. Do not say this to make yourself gloomy. Say it to remove surprise. What harms us most is not only the event but our astonishment at it. The one who expects life to be smooth is shattered by the first stone in the road. But the one who has already accepted that human beings act according to their character, that fortune does not consult our preferences, and that the world will not arrange itself around our comfort, stands ready. He is not shocked, he is prepared. He has already made peace with the truth that hardship is part of the human condition. Preparation is a form of freedom. If you wish to control your mind, you must also control the company you keep inside it. Many people allow their inner life to be crowded by voices that should never have been admitted. The opinions of the angry, the shallow, the weak, the envious, the vain, the fearful, the sensational, and the irresponsible all compete for your attention. They make a marketplace of your soul. You need not live that way. Attention is a moral act. What you attend to shapes what you become. If you feed on disorder, you will think in disorder. If you feed on complaint, you will become fluent in complaint. If you feed on vanity, you will grow hollow. If you feed on fear, you will become smaller than your nature. But if you attend to what is just, necessary, and within your power, your mind begins to settle into its proper form. It becomes clear, it becomes stern, it becomes usable. You must learn to separate what depends on you from what does not. Not as a phrase to memorize, but as a habit of seeing. Your judgments, your choices, your actions, your willingness to do what is right, your refusal to lie to yourself, your acceptance of your duty, these belong to you. Your reputation, the outcome of your efforts, the behavior of others, the weather, the timing of events, the health of your body, the judgments of the crowd, these do not. The mind suffers when it confuses the two. It attaches its peace to what is uncertain, and then acts surprised when uncertainty reveals itself. A man says he will be happy once people respect him. A woman says she will be calm once life gives her more control. A student says he will be disciplined once he feels motivated. A worker says he will be virtuous once the environment improves. Such people have made themselves dependent on what they do not govern. They have mistaken hope for control. Do not make that error. Your task is not to command the world. Your task is to command yourself in the world. This means that when something is not up to you, Your first duty is not to resist reality, but to meet it well. Acceptance is not surrender of virtue, it is the refusal to waste yourself on a battle you cannot win. When the weather changes, the honest person adjusts. When an opportunity disappears, the wise person continues. When someone fails you, the disciplined person examines his own response, instead of turning that failure into a theater of rage. When your body weakens, you do not curse the nature of bodies, you care for it without becoming enslaved to it. When you are misunderstood, you do not abandon your principles to win approval. You continue to act justly, because justice is not dependent on applause. This is how the mind becomes master of itself, by refusing to confuse pain with defeat. Pain will come, defeat is optional. But do not imagine this path is gentle. It is demanding. It asks you to face your vanity and call it vanity. It asks you to face your laziness and call it laziness. It asks you to face your excuse-making and stop dressing it up as circumstance. The undisciplined mind loves to claim it is overwhelmed, but often it is merely indulged. It loves to say it is exhausted, but often it is addicted to waste. It loves to say it is too sensitive, but often it is too attached to comfort. It loves to say it has tried, but often it has only wished. Stoic discipline does not flatter these self-deceptions, it names them, then it works. The person who wants mastery without discomfort, wants the crown without the labor, that is not philosophy, that is childishness. The inner life is forged, not wished into existence. You must therefore begin to practice voluntary discomfort, not for drama, not for pride, for training. Deny yourself small comforts from time to time so that your mind learns it does not require indulgence to remain stable. Take the cold air, sit in silence, eat simply, walk without music. Leave some desires unmet on purpose, not because comfort is evil, but because dependence is. A person who cannot live without constant stimulation is not free. A person who cannot be content without soft conditions is not strong. Train yourself to tolerate less so that you become less fragile when life gives you less. You will discover that much of what you feared losing was never necessary to begin with. The soul grows steadier when it learns that pleasure is optional and duty is not. You must also train your response before the heat of the moment arrives. The pause before reaction is a sacred interval. In that brief space lies your human dignity. Someone speaks sharply to you. Do not answer immediately. A painful memory rises. Do not obey it immediately. A desire pulls at you. Do not follow it immediately. A fear predicts disaster. Do not accept it immediately. Pause. Breathe if you must, but more importantly, interrogate the impression. Ask, what exactly is happening? What part of this is fact? What part is interpretation? What is within my power here? What response would keep faith with reason? What response would preserve my character? The pause is where the mind becomes ruler instead of servant. Without the pause, you are dragged. With it, you choose, and choice is the mark of a free person. Do not underestimate the danger of unchecked emotion. Emotion itself is not the enemy, for feeling follows judgment and human beings are not stones. But emotion without reason becomes a storm that breaks its own ship. Anger convinces a person that revenge is justice. Fear convinces a person that avoidance is safety. Desire convinces a person that possession is happiness. Grief can convince a person that the world has ended because one part of it has changed. Every passion, if unchecked, speaks in absolutes. It says now, forever, everything, nothing, ruin, salvation. A disciplined mind does not trust such language. It listens, but it does not obey. It asks whether the feeling corresponds to reality or merely to appetite, whether the pain points to an actual evil or only to an inconvenience, whether the anger arises from justice or from injured vanity. The mind must become a judge, not a victim. And what is the proper object of your life, if not virtue? If the goal is money, you will be poor whenever money is absent. If the goal is status, you will be anxious whenever attention shifts. If the goal is pleasure, you will become weak whenever pleasure recedes. If the goal is praise, you will become dependent on the crowd. But if the goal is virtue, then nothing can deprive you of your true good except your own corruption. You can be poor and virtuous. You can be ignored and virtuous. You can be ill and virtuous. You can be ill and virtuous. You can be opposed and virtuous. You can be alone and virtuous. This is why the Stoic life is hard to undermine. It does not ask fortune for permission to remain worthy. It places worth where fortune cannot reach it, in the use of reason, in the quality of choice, in the steadfastness of character. The mind that serves virtue becomes more difficult to manipulate. It cannot be bought by comfort, bullied by fear, or seduced by applause as easily as before. It begins to see the world with clearer eyes. It understands that people often act from ignorance, from compulsion, from habit, from passion, from the narrowness of their own vision. This does not excuse wrongdoing, but it prevents you from becoming emotionally enslaved to it. When someone behaves badly, you do not need to make their behavior a catastrophe. You need only determine what virtue requires of you now. Sometimes it is patience. Sometimes it is firmness, sometimes it is silence, sometimes it is withdrawal, sometimes it is correction. But it is never surrender of your own soul. The bad conduct of another is not a license for your own. You will fail at this, not once but many times. Do not become dramatic about your failure. Do not turn one weakness into an identity. The Stoic path is not the path of pretending to be flawless. It is the path of becoming honest. When you lose your composure, see it clearly. When you gave in to anger, name it. When you wasted time, admit it. When you indulged a fear, confess it to yourself. When you chose convenience over duty, do not hide behind excuses. A soul cannot be healed by denial. It can only be healed by truth. The evening examination exists for this reason. Before sleep, review the day. Where did you act in accordance with reason? Where did you fall short? Where did you speak too quickly, judge too rashly, desire too greedily, avoid too cowardly, or complain too easily? Do this without theatrical guilt and without self-satisfaction. See yourself as you are. Then decide what must change tomorrow. This practice makes the mind answerable to itself. A man who examines himself daily becomes harder to deceive. He cannot endlessly maintain the fantasy that he is better than he is, nor does he sink into despair at his weaknesses. He knows that character is built through correction. He knows that the same mind that made a bad choice can learn to make a better one. He knows that the self is not a finished statue but a living discipline. So he returns to the work, again and again. He does not wait for a perfect mood. He does not wait for life to become easy. He does not wait for a miracle of motivation. He returns because duty calls, because reason commands, because the soul is never improved by postponement. There is no power in self-pity. It feels deep, but it is shallow. It feeds on the idea that you are uniquely burdened, uniquely misunderstood, uniquely cursed, but the human condition is burden enough for everyone. All of us contend with loss, ignorance, desire, fear, fatigue, time, mortality, and the limits of our understanding. You are not singled out by nature for special cruelty. You are a human being among human beings. The task is universal, to meet life with a mind that is steady, just, courageous, and temperate. Stop asking why life is hard as though hard things were an exception. Ask instead how you will meet hardness with dignity. That question leads somewhere useful. The first leads only to complaint. Do not wait for external peace before you practice inner peace. The world will never arrange itself so neatly that you have no reason to discipline your mind. There will always be some cause for irritation, some pull toward distraction, some temptation to surrender to appetite, some fear about tomorrow, some memory that stings, some plan that fails, some person who tests your patience. That is not a defect in the structure of your life. That is the arena of training. The obstacle is not blocking the path, it is the path. Every frustration gives you an opportunity to practice governance. Every delay gives you a chance to exercise patience. Every insult gives you a chance to refuse false judgment. Every disappointment gives you a chance to distinguish between preference and necessity. Every burden gives you a chance to prove that your happiness does not depend on easy conditions. When a difficult moment arrives, return to first principles. Ask what this moment is asking of your character. Do not ask first how to escape discomfort. Ask how to act well. The mind weakens when it is obsessed with relief. It strengthens when it is devoted to right action. Relief may come or may not come. Right action is always available in some form. You can tell the truth. You can refrain from retaliation. You can complete the work before you. You can endure with steadiness. You can apologize. You can correct your course. You can let go of what is not yours to control. These are not small things. These are the substance of freedom. And do not imagine that controlling your mind means becoming cold. The Stoic is not numb. He is clear. He does not abandon affection. He refuses dependence. He does not abandon care. He refuses confusion. He can love others deeply without making them the condition of his serenity. He can work with intensity without making outcomes his master. He can grieve without collapsing into bitterness. He can enjoy without becoming soft. He can resist injustice without becoming consumed by hatred. This balance is not weakness. It is strength guided by reason. The untrained person thinks strength means being driven by every feeling. But strength is the ability to remain upright inside feeling, to keep the soul from being overrun by it. The world will offer you many invitations to abandon yourself. It will invite you to rage because rage is easy. It will invite you to panic because panic is contagious. It will invite you to envy because envy is a cheap way of feeding wounded pride. It will invite you to numbness because numbness looks like relief. It will invite you to distraction because distraction makes you forget your duty. Refuse these invitations. They do not lead to freedom. They lead to scattered living, and a scattered life is a life half owned by impulse. Gather yourself, return to the center, bring your attention back to what is yours to govern. Speak to yourself with severity when necessary, because softness toward your own corruption is cruelty disguised as kindness. A strict mind is not a hateful mind. It is a mind that refuses to let weakness become law. Every day gives you evidence of what you worship. If you are upset all day by inconvenience, then convenience is your God. If you are shattered by criticism, then approval is your God. If you are obsessed with loss, then possession is your God. If you cannot bear to be inconvenienced in small matters, then comfort is your God. Inspect yourself honestly. The soul bends toward whatever it fears losing most. Therefore, where your fear reveals your dependence, your discipline must intervene. Train yourself to lose lesser things without losing yourself. Train yourself to be denied without becoming bitter. Train yourself to be overlooked without becoming petty. Train yourself to be opposed without becoming unstable. These are not theoretical exercises. This is how a free mind is made. You will never perfect this in a single day, so do not be discouraged by the distance between your present state and the disciplined life you admire. Begin where you are. Use what is before you. The next irritation is your classroom. The next temptation is your test. The next disappointment is your opportunity. The next disagreement is your chance to practice justice without ego. The next task you have delayed is your chance to recover self-command. Do not speak of becoming disciplined as if it were some distant identity you will receive later. Discipline is a series of present acts, one refusal, one correction, one honest thought, one composed response, one completed duty, one morning of attention, one evening of review. These are the bricks of character. There is a severe comfort in this truth. Your life can begin to change today, not because the world has changed, but because you have. The mind that once scattered itself can gather. The soul that once submitted to every appearance can begin to judge. The person who once lived by impulse can begin to live by reason. The one who was ruled by fear can learn courage through repeated practice. The one who was ruled by desire can learn moderation through repeated denial. The one who was ruled by anger can learn restraint through deliberate pause. The one who was ruled by laziness can learn duty through action taken before mood arrives. This is not fantasy, it is the labor of philosophy. Do not ask whether this labor will make you popular. It may make you respected, or it may make you misunderstood. That is not your concern. Your concern is whether you have become a better steward of your own mind. Have you learned to refuse falsehood? Have you learned to accept what is outside your power? Have you learned to direct your energy toward what is worthy? Have you learned to meet trouble without complaint? Have you learned to judge impressions rather than be ruled by them? Have you learned to live in a way that could withstand scrutiny from your own conscience? These are the questions that matter. And when you fall short, do not flee from yourself. Return. The mind is strengthened not by never failing, but by refusing to remain fallen. Each return matters. Each act of self-command matters. Each refusal to indulge weakness matters. Each moment you pause before reacting matters. Each time you choose reason over impulse, you reinforce the authority of the rational self. Over time, these choices alter the structure of your inner life. What once felt impossible becomes natural. What once felt strained becomes steady. What once ruled you becomes merely another impression passing through. This is the work. No one can do it for you. No teacher can install it in your soul. No praise can replace it. No book can substitute for it. No promise of better conditions can delay it. You must choose it in the midst of ordinary life, in the middle of noise, fatigue, temptation, irritation, and uncertainty. That is the only place where it becomes real. That is the only place where character is formed. And if you do this work, if you actually do it, then you will discover something severe and beautiful at once. Your peace does not depend on the mercy of the world. It depends on the justice of your own mind. Guard that mind, train that mind, obey that mind when it has been purified by reason. Let it command your desires, your fears, your speech, your silence, your anger, your patience, and your action. Then you will no longer be dragged through life by every passing wind. You will stand, you will choose, you will endure, you will act, and in acting well you will become free. Number 2. Control thoughts, conquer suffering. Your suffering did not begin the day life became difficult. It began the day you started believing every thought that entered your mind deserved your trust. You have been treating passing judgments as permanent truths, fleeting emotions as reliable guides, and imagined disasters as certain realities. The greatest prison is not built from walls or chains, it is built from unquestioned thinking. Every day you wake, countless impressions arrive before your reason has spoken. They whisper that you have been insulted, that you have failed, that tomorrow will ruin you, that another person's success diminishes your own, that comfort matters more than character, that your peace depends on circumstances arranging themselves according to your wishes. If you accept these impressions without examination, Your own mind becomes the architect of your suffering. You have likely spent years trying to rearrange the outside world while neglecting the only place where true freedom can be found. You have hoped that better people, better opportunities, better timing, or better fortune would finally quiet your restless thoughts. Yet every time one problem disappeared, another appeared in its place. The mind that has not learnt discipline carries disturbance into every situation. A peaceful room becomes anxious. A loving relationship becomes burdened with suspicion. A successful career becomes haunted by fear of loss. The problem is rarely the place you stand. The problem is the judgment you carry with you wherever you go. The first task of a disciplined person is not to chase pleasant feelings, but to become suspicious of immediate conclusions. Your first thought is only an arrival. It is not a command. It has not earned your obedience simply because it appeared quickly. The untrained mind mistakes speed for truth. It assumes whatever appears first must also be correct. But reason works differently. Reason waits. It examines. It refuses to surrender before evidence has been weighed. This single habit separates a governed soul from one dragged in every direction by impulse. Notice how quickly your thinking exaggerates ordinary events. A delayed message becomes rejection. A mistake becomes proof of incompetence. A disagreement becomes the end of trust. A temporary setback becomes a permanent identity. The mind naturally expands discomfort when left unattended. It paints ordinary difficulties in dramatic colors until they seem impossible to endure. Yet reality rarely speaks with such extremes. It simply presents facts. Your judgment adds the suffering. You often say that another person ruined your peace, but examine this honestly. Their words reached your ears. Your judgment carried them into your heart. Between the event and your distress stood your own interpretation. This is not an accusation. It is an invitation to reclaim responsibility. If your suffering depends entirely upon another person's behavior, then your peace has already been surrendered. But if your suffering grows from judgments that belong to you, then your freedom also belongs to you. The same place where suffering begins is the place where it can end. Every morning, before the demands of the day gather around you, sit quietly for a few moments and prepare your thinking instead of your schedule. Ask yourself what belongs to you today. Your choices belong to you. Your honesty belongs to you. Your patience belongs to you. Your willingness to meet each circumstance with virtue belongs to you. Everything else arrives from outside. Outcomes, opinions, delays, praise, criticism, and fortune do not belong to your command. When this distinction becomes clear before the day begins, fewer surprises will disturb your mind because you have already accepted the proper limits of your authority. Carry this question with you throughout the day whenever your thoughts begin racing beyond reason. Ask yourself, what exactly has happened? Then ask, what have I added? Most distress grows from what is added. The event itself may be simple, but imagination quickly builds a fortress around it. One conversation becomes 20 imagined arguments. One uncertainty becomes endless predictions. One disappointment becomes evidence that life itself is against you. Strip away everything added by fear, pride, or desire until only the bare fact remains. Facts are often easier to carry than stories. The disciplined mind learns to separate appearance from reality with great care. Appearance says you have lost everything because one plan failed. Reality says one plan failed. Appearance says someone else's opinion defines your worth. Reality says another person expressed an opinion. Appearance says discomfort must be escaped immediately. Reality says discomfort is present and can be endured without surrendering your character. These distinctions seem small, but they shape the entire course of your life. A single mistaken judgment repeated daily becomes a habit. Habits become character. Character becomes destiny. You have also trained yourself to rehearse injuries that no longer exist. The body leaves yesterday behind, but the undisciplined mind carries it forward. It revisits old conversations, old insults, old failures, and old embarrassments until memories become fresh wounds. Ask yourself what purpose this serves. Does repeated resentment improve your character? Does replaying humiliation make you wiser? Does reliving regret change what has already happened? The answer is always the same. You are surrendering today's reason to yesterday's shadow. This does not mean forgetting every painful experience. Memory has value when it teaches wisdom, but memory becomes poison when it exists only to reopen suffering. Learn from what happened, then release your grip upon it. You cannot govern yesterday. You can only govern the judgment you make about it today. Every unnecessary return to old pain is another opportunity to practice letting reason lead where emotion wishes to linger. The same discipline must be applied to the future. Fear rarely concerns what is happening now. It concerns imagined possibilities. The mind invents disasters and suffers them long before reality has spoken. It spends today's strength fighting tomorrow's fantasies. Meanwhile, today's responsibilities remain neglected. This is one of the most expensive habits a person can develop. Energy is spent where action is impossible, while duty waits unattended. Whenever anxiety begins constructing futures beyond your control, bring yourself back to the present responsibility. Ask what action reason requires now. There is always something within reach. You can complete the task before you. You can speak honestly. You can remain just. You can act with moderation. You can fulfill your responsibilities with care. These actions belong to you. Tomorrow does not. Many people search endlessly for certainty before they act. They believe confidence must arrive first. But confidence built upon guaranteed outcomes is fragile because outcomes never belong entirely to us. Real confidence grows from trusting your own character. You cannot promise success, but you can promise honesty. You cannot promise victory, but you can promise effort. You cannot promise approval, but you can promise integrity. When your trust rests upon your own commitment to virtue, instead of external results, fear begins losing its authority. You must also become watchful of complaint. Complaint feels productive because it gives voice to discomfort, yet it rarely improves the situation. It trains the mind to notice obstacles while ignoring opportunities for virtue. Every complaint strengthens the habit of believing circumstances are responsible for your inner condition. Instead of asking why life has become difficult, ask what excellence this difficulty invites from you. Every challenge presents an opportunity to practice patience, courage, justice, or self-control. Difficulty is not merely something to survive. It is material for the formation of character. There will be moments when your thoughts race faster than your reason can answer them. In those moments, do not argue with every fear immediately. Instead, return to simple truths. Ask whether what troubles you belongs to your control. If it does, act without delay. If it does not, release your demand that reality obey your wishes. Refusing to distinguish between these two paths guarantees unnecessary suffering. Wisdom begins by making this separation without hesitation. Each evening, before sleep claims the day, become both witness and judge of your own thinking. Do not ask whether the day was pleasant. Ask whether your judgments remained faithful to reason. Where did you exaggerate? Where did you assume motives without evidence? Where did pride distort your perception? Where did fear persuade you to abandon what was right? Where did desire convince you that comfort mattered more than virtue? Examine these moments carefully, not to punish yourself, but to educate your own mind. Every honest examination prepares tomorrow's improvement. This daily review gradually removes self-deception. You begin noticing patterns that once remained hidden. You see how often irritation grows from expectation. You notice how quickly envy appears when comparison replaces gratitude for your own duty. You recognize how often anger follows wounded pride rather than genuine injustice. These discoveries are not reasons for shame. They are evidence that your attention has become sharper. A person cannot correct what remains unseen. Control of thought does not require that every unwanted idea disappear forever. Human impressions will continue arriving without invitation. What changes is your response. Instead of welcoming every thought as truth, you become its examiner. Instead of serving each emotion, you ask whether it deserves your cooperation. Instead of following every impulse toward comfort, you ask whether comfort supports virtue or weakens it. Little by little, reason resumes its rightful place as governor of the soul. There will be days when old habits return with surprising force. Do not mistake temporary failure for permanent defeat. Character is strengthened through repeated correction. Every moment you notice an undisciplined judgment and replace it with a reasonable one, you strengthen your ability to do so again. Improvement belongs to those who return patiently to the work without demanding immediate perfection. The greatest victory is rarely visible to the world. It happens in silence when resentment is refused before it becomes speech. It happens when fear is examined before it becomes avoidance. It happens when desire is restrained before it becomes excess. It happens when a harsh impression arrives and finds a mind unwilling to surrender without careful judgment. These victories receive no applause, yet they shape the entire quality of a life. Do not measure your progress by how easy your days become. Measure it by how steadily your mind remains aligned with reason when days become difficult. Fortune changes without asking your permission. Circumstances rise and fall like the seasons. People will continue acting according to their own understanding. None of these realities need disturb a mind trained to distinguish between what belongs to itself and what never did. Remember this whenever suffering begins to gather around your thoughts. Your greatest task is not controlling events, it is governing the judgments you make about them. The moment your thinking submits itself to reason instead of impulse, suffering begins losing the authority it once held over your life. Your freedom has never depended upon perfect circumstances. It has always depended upon the discipline to think clearly, judge honestly, and choose virtue above every passing appearance. Continue this work each day with quiet determination, and you will discover that the strongest fortress is not built from stone, but from a mind that refuses to betray itself. Number 3. Accept reality without resistance. Reality has never asked for your permission before unfolding. It does not negotiate with your preferences, delay its course because you are unprepared, or soften itself because you wish it were different. Yet much of the pain you carry is not born from reality itself. It grows from the endless argument you wage against what has already happened. You exhaust yourself insisting that events should have followed another path, that people should have acted differently, that time should reverse itself, or that fortune should answer to your desires. While your mind remains occupied with these impossible demands, your character stands neglected. The disciplined life begins with a simple recognition. Existence unfolds according to causes greater than any individual will. Your freedom is not found in commanding those causes, it is found in deciding how you will meet them. The person who refuses this truth spends every day wrestling with circumstances that cannot be persuaded. The person who accepts it directs that same strength toward governing judgment, intention and action. One life is consumed by resistance, the other is strengthened by responsibility. Notice how often your thoughts begin with the word should. The meeting should have gone differently. The weather should have cooperated. The opportunity should have remained available. Someone should have appreciated your effort. Each of these expectations attempts to place authority over the world where none exists. Reality does not become unjust because it ignores your preferences. It simply continues according to its own order. Wisdom begins when you stop measuring life against imagined alternatives and begin responding to the life that is actually before you. Acceptance is frequently misunderstood. Many assume it means approving of everything that happens or abandoning the effort to improve what can be improved. It means neither. Acceptance simply refuses to deny facts. A fact cannot be made false by anger. A loss cannot be undone through complaint. A difficult conversation cannot be erased by wishing it had never occurred. Once you acknowledge what is true, your energy becomes available for the only meaningful question that remains: what is the most virtuous response available now? This question changes the direction of your entire day. Instead of asking why inconvenience has found you, ask what quality of character this moment invites. Delay may call for patience. Success may call for humility. Criticism may call for careful examination rather than immediate defense. Uncertainty may call for courage instead of endless prediction. Every circumstance presents an opportunity to exercise excellence, but only if you stop demanding that circumstances become easier before you begin acting well. When you wake each morning, prepare your mind before engaging with the world. Remind yourself that you do not control events, only the use you make of them. Resolve that no unexpected difficulty will persuade you to abandon honesty, fairness, moderation, or courage. The purpose of this reflection is not to predict every challenge, but to establish the principles that will guide you regardless of which challenges appear. As the day unfolds, develop the habit of meeting every disturbance with a brief pause. Before naming something a disaster, ask whether the event itself has damaged your character or merely interrupted your preference. These are not the same. Your plans may change without your integrity changing. Your comfort may disappear while your dignity remains untouched. Learning to distinguish inconvenience from genuine moral failure protects the mind from unnecessary turmoil. Many people live as though every disappointment were a personal injustice. This habit quietly transforms ordinary life into constant conflict. Traffic becomes an insult, delay becomes oppression, disagreement becomes betrayal. Expectations grow so rigid that reality can only disappoint them. A disciplined mind loosens its attachment to preferred outcomes without abandoning purposeful action. It works diligently, prepares carefully, and pursues worthwhile goals, yet it never mistakes success for something guaranteed. The greatest obstacle to acceptance is often pride. Pride whispers that life owes you different circumstances because your intentions were good. It insists that effort deserves immediate reward and that virtue should always be recognized. But nature offers no such promises. You may act wisely and still encounter hardship. You may speak truthfully and still be misunderstood. You may fulfill your responsibilities and still experience loss. None of these outcomes diminish the worth of acting well. Throughout the day, return repeatedly to the distinction between what belongs to your character and what belongs to fortune. Your conduct remains yours. The responses of others do not. Your commitment to justice remains yours. Public approval does not. Your willingness to persevere remains yours. External results never fully are. Every time you make this distinction, you reclaim attention that would otherwise be wasted pursuing what cannot be possessed through force of will. When evening arrives, review the day with complete honesty. Do not ask whether everything unfolded according to your hopes. Ask whether you remained faithful to your principles when events departed from your expectations. Where did resistance consume energy that could have been devoted to useful action? Where did you confuse inconvenience with genuine harm? Where did you refuse to acknowledge reality because it conflicted with your wishes? Each answer becomes instruction for tomorrow. The person who learns to accept reality without resistance does not become passive. Such a person becomes remarkably effective. Energy once wasted arguing with the unavoidable is redirected toward meaningful effort. Complaints give way to careful judgment. Frustration yields to deliberate action. Peace emerges not because life has become easier, but because the struggle against what already exists has ended. In that freedom, reason can guide every choice, virtue can shape every action, and each day becomes another opportunity to live in harmony with reality rather than in conflict with it. Number 4. Discipline creates inner freedom. Many people spend their lives searching for freedom in the wrong places. They imagine it waits inside wealth, comfort, recognition, leisure, or the absence of difficulty. They believe that if enough obstacles disappear, peace will finally arrive. Yet the person who depends on favorable conditions is never truly free. Every change in circumstance becomes another opportunity for fear, frustration, or disappointment. Freedom cannot rest upon what changes from one day to the next. It must be rooted in something that remains under your guidance regardless of fortune. That foundation is discipline. Discipline is often mistaken for restriction. It is imagined as a burden that removes joy and replaces it with constant struggle. This misunderstanding keeps many people trapped inside habits they secretly dislike. They believe that following every impulse is freedom, while every unexamined impulse quietly becomes another chain. The person who cannot refuse an unnecessary desire is not exercising liberty. The person who cannot remain calm when expectations are frustrated is not directing life from reason. The person who cannot complete what duty requires without waiting for motivation has surrendered authority over action. Discipline does not imprison such a person. It offers the key to escape. Look carefully at the ordinary moments that shape your character. A difficult conversation appears, and the immediate temptation is to defend yourself before understanding the other person. A demanding task waits, and comfort persuades you to postpone it. Someone receives recognition, and comparison quietly enters your thinking. A minor inconvenience interrupts your plans, and irritation begins demanding expression. These moments seem insignificant, yet they reveal who governs your life. If instinct always decides before reason has spoken, then your choices belong to habit rather than judgment. The disciplined mind develops a different pattern. It creates space between impression and action. That space is where freedom begins. Instead of moving with the first emotional current, it pauses long enough to ask whether the next action reflects integrity, fairness, courage, or moderation. This brief examination transforms ordinary moments into opportunities for character. A single thoughtful decision may appear small, yet repeated consistently it reshapes an entire life. Each morning offers a fresh opportunity to establish this direction. Before allowing external demands to occupy your attention, spend time preparing your own character. Remind yourself that the day ahead cannot be controlled in every detail, but your conduct remains your responsibility. Resolve that circumstances will not determine whether you practice honesty, patience, or self-command. Such preparation is not wishful thinking. It is the deliberate alignment of intention before distraction begins competing for your attention. Throughout the day, notice how often convenience competes with what you know is right. Convenience asks you to avoid uncomfortable conversations. It suggests delaying meaningful work until conditions feel perfect. It encourages silence when honesty would require courage. It persuades you that temporary ease matters more than lasting integrity. Every time you surrender to convenience against your better judgment, discipline becomes weaker. Every time you choose what reason recognizes as proper despite discomfort, discipline grows stronger. This strengthening rarely announces itself with dramatic change. It develops quietly through repetition. A person who consistently keeps small promises to themselves becomes capable of keeping greater ones. A person who regularly governs speech becomes less vulnerable to anger. A person who repeatedly chooses moderation develops independence from unnecessary desire. Character is built through accumulated decisions rather than extraordinary moments. Do not expect discipline to eliminate struggle. Its purpose is not to remove difficulty, but to change your relationship with it. Challenges continue arriving because they belong to human life. What changes is the condition of the person meeting them. The undisciplined individual sees obstacles as interruptions. The disciplined individual sees them as opportunities to exercise virtue. Patience cannot exist without occasions requiring patience. Courage cannot exist without circumstances involving fear. Self-restraint has meaning only when temptation is present. Difficulty supplies the material upon which character is formed. You may discover that the greatest resistance comes not from the outside world, but from familiar habits within yourself. The mind prefers routines, even unhealthy ones. It repeats old patterns because they require less effort than conscious examination. This is why honest self-observation is indispensable. Notice recurring reactions without inventing excuses for them. Notice repeated complaints without immediately justifying them. Notice moments when pride disguises itself as principle or comfort disguises itself as wisdom. Clarity always comes before improvement. One valuable practice is to examine every significant decision by asking a simple question. Does this action strengthen my character or weaken it? The answer often appears more quickly than expected. You already know when avoidance replaces responsibility. You already recognize when resentment replaces fairness. You already sense when desire begins directing judgment instead of reason. The challenge is rarely ignorance. The challenge is choosing discipline when impulse promises an easier path. Remember that discipline extends beyond visible actions. It also governs attention. Whatever repeatedly occupies your thoughts gradually shapes your outlook. If your attention constantly returns to resentment, dissatisfaction grows stronger. If it continually searches for approval, dependence deepens. If it remains fixed upon responsibilities and virtuous action, the mind gradually becomes steadier. Attention is not passive. It is an act of choice that influences every later judgment. There will be occasions when your efforts produce outcomes different from what you hoped. At such moments, discipline protects you from unnecessary despair. You remind yourself that faithful effort belongs to your responsibility, while final results depend upon many causes beyond personal control. This understanding does not weaken commitment. It allows wholehearted effort without emotional captivity to success or failure. You work diligently because excellence is worth pursuing, not because the world guarantees reward. As evening approaches, allow the day to become your teacher. Sit quietly and review your conduct with honesty free from both pride and harsh self-condemnation. Where did discipline guide your actions? Where did impulse reclaim authority? Which moments revealed growing steadiness? Which moments exposed familiar weaknesses requiring renewed attention? This reflection is not an exercise in regret. It is practical instruction for tomorrow. Every accurate observation becomes material for future improvement. You will gradually discover that discipline simplifies life. Decisions once clouded by conflicting desires become clearer because your standard no longer changes with every passing emotion. Relationships become steadier because reactions are governed less by wounded pride and more by fairness. Work becomes more consistent because effort no longer depends upon fluctuating enthusiasm. Peace becomes more reliable because it rests upon the quality of your character rather than the uncertainty of external conditions. Many people fear that disciplined living will diminish their happiness. The opposite proves true. The person ruled by appetite is constantly anxious about satisfying it. The person ruled by public opinion fears every criticism. The person ruled by comfort dreads every inconvenience. Dependence creates insecurity because it hands authority to whatever lies outside reason. Discipline gradually removes these dependencies. As they weaken, inner freedom expands. Do not measure your progress by perfection. Measure it by increasing consistency. Ask whether reason speaks more often before impulse. Ask whether disappointment occupies less of your attention than duty. Ask whether your decisions increasingly reflect deliberate judgment instead of immediate feeling. These quiet changes indicate genuine growth because they strengthen the only possession that remains truly your own, the quality of your character. The disciplined person is not someone who never encounters temptation or frustration. It is someone who repeatedly chooses what is right despite both. Every act of self-command becomes evidence that freedom is not granted by fortune but cultivated through practice. Every honest decision strengthens independence from circumstances that once controlled your emotions. Every return to reason reminds you that your greatest achievement is not mastering the world around you, but mastering the principles that guide your own life. Continue this work patiently. Do not search for shortcuts, because none exist. Character matures through daily practice carried out with sincerity and perseverance. Each morning, renew your intention. Throughout the day, guard your judgments. Each evening, examine your conduct with honesty. Over time, discipline ceases to feel like effort alone. It becomes your natural way of living, and with it comes the quiet freedom that no external event can either grant or take away. Number 5. Ignore what you can't control. Every day you spend energy trying to direct things that have never belonged to your authority. You attempt to shape another person's opinion, predict every future event, erase the consequences of the past, and guarantee results that depend on countless causes beyond your reach. When these efforts fail, frustration follows, and you mistake that frustration for evidence that life is unfair. Yet the deeper problem is not the world refusing your wishes. It is the assumption that your peace should depend upon matters that were never yours to command. The mind naturally reaches outward. It wants certainty where none exists. It wants promises that every effort will succeed, every relationship will remain unchanged, every plan will unfold exactly as expected. But reality does not offer such guarantees. A life built upon demanding certainty from uncertain things will always be unstable. The more tightly you cling to outcomes, the more vulnerable you become whenever circumstances change. Lasting steadiness begins when you recognize that not everything deserves your emotional investment. This recognition does not encourage indifference toward life. It encourages precision. There is an important difference between caring about something and believing you possess complete authority over it. You may care deeply about your work without believing success is entirely yours to secure. You may care for those you love without imagining you can govern every decision they make. You may pursue worthwhile goals with dedication while accepting that the final result depends upon many factors outside your own intention. This distinction preserves commitment while freeing the mind from unnecessary burden. Many people unknowingly scatter their attention across problems that cannot be solved through worry. Hours disappear imagining conversations that have not occurred, predicting setbacks that may never arrive, or replaying moments that cannot be changed. Meanwhile, responsibilities that genuinely belong to them remain neglected. Time is spent attempting to influence what is absent instead of acting well within what is present. A disciplined life requires recovering attention from these endless distractions. Begin each morning by asking a practical question. Where does my responsibility end? This question deserves careful thought because confusion about responsibility creates endless dissatisfaction. Your decisions belong to you. Your willingness to act honorably belongs to you. Your effort belongs to you. The reactions of others, the passage of time, changing circumstances, and the outcome of every undertaking do not fully belong to your direction. Once this boundary becomes clear, your energy can be invested where it has the power to produce genuine improvement. As the day unfolds, remain alert whenever your thoughts begin demanding control over another person's character. You may offer guidance, kindness, correction, or example, but you cannot choose in another person's place. Attempting to carry responsibility for another mind eventually becomes resentment or exhaustion. Respecting this boundary does not weaken compassion. It strengthens it by removing unrealistic expectations that no human relationship can sustain. The same principle applies to reputation. Many people quietly surrender their peace to opinions they cannot inspect or manage. They spend extraordinary effort attempting to appear flawless in every circumstance, yet every observer brings different experiences, values, and assumptions. Complete agreement among people has never existed. If your tranquility depends upon universal approval, disappointment becomes inevitable. Instead, let your concern rest upon whether your conduct deserves your own respect. Character remains available even when praise does not. When disappointment arrives, examine it carefully before reacting. Ask yourself whether you are grieving the loss of something truly under your guidance or simply mourning the collapse of an expectation. Expectations often disguise themselves as necessities. You begin believing life owes you uninterrupted progress, immediate recognition, constant comfort, or permanent certainty. Once these imagined guarantees dissolve, reality feels harsher than it truly is. Releasing unrealistic expectations allows you to meet circumstances with clearer judgment. You will notice that anger frequently grows from the same misunderstanding. Anger often appears when the world refuses to behave according to your private script. Someone speaks differently than you hoped. A delay interrupts your schedule. An opportunity passes to another person. These moments reveal how easily preference can transform into demand. Replace demand with acceptance of reality, and many unnecessary conflicts lose their strength before they fully develop. Whenever frustration begins rising within you, pause before speaking or acting. Ask one question with complete honesty. Is my distress attempting to change something that lies beyond my authority? If the answer is yes, withdraw your effort from that impossible task. Redirect it toward what remains available. You can still choose patience, you can still choose fairness, you can still choose careful judgment. Even when events refuse your wishes, your character remains waiting for instruction. One of the greatest forms of inner discipline is learning to complete your responsibilities without negotiating constantly with future outcomes. Perform each task because excellence deserves your full attention now, not because success has been guaranteed. A farmer prepares the soil without controlling the weather. A craftsman shapes each piece without controlling every customer's opinion. A teacher offers knowledge without controlling every student's willingness to learn. Meaningful work has always required acting faithfully despite uncertainty. There is also wisdom in accepting the limits of knowledge. The mind often believes it understands how events should unfold, yet countless unseen causes influence every situation. What first appears to be failure may become the beginning of unexpected growth. What seems like immediate success may later reveal hidden difficulties. Since your perspective is always incomplete, humility becomes an essential companion to reason. Resist declaring every unexpected event either entirely fortunate or entirely disastrous before time has revealed its full consequences. As evening approaches, allow yourself a period of quiet reflection. Instead of counting achievements or disappointments, examine where your attention was invested. Did you spend more energy managing your own conduct or attempting to manage circumstances beyond your reach? Did you devote greater effort to honest action or to imagined outcomes? This review gradually teaches the mind where its strength is most valuable. Each day becomes instruction for the next. You will discover that peace does not require withdrawing from responsibility. It requires withdrawing from illusion. Illusion tells you that every outcome depends upon your effort alone. Reality reminds you that your effort is one cause among many. Illusion insists that another person's behavior determines your inner condition. Reality reminds you that your judgments remain your own. Illusion demands certainty before action. Reality invites faithful action despite uncertainty. Freedom emerges quietly through this practice. It does not arrive because life suddenly becomes predictable. It arrives because your attention no longer wanders endlessly toward what cannot be possessed. Energy once wasted on fruitless resistance becomes available for thoughtful speech, meaningful work, fair treatment of others, and steady perseverance. These are possessions that remain within your reach, regardless of changing fortune. You may still encounter loss, criticism, delay, illness, misunderstanding, or disappointment. None of these experiences disappear simply because your understanding has improved. What changes is the place from which you meet them. Instead of responding with helpless frustration, you respond with deliberate judgment. Instead of allowing circumstances to dictate your state of mind, you remember that your true responsibility begins and ends with the quality of your own choices. Return to this distinction every morning until it becomes familiar. Return to it during every difficult conversation. Return to it whenever worry begins inventing responsibilities that do not belong to you. Return to it before sleep as you examine the use you made of the day. Over time, your thinking becomes less scattered because it no longer pursues impossible forms of control. It becomes calmer because it no longer confuses preference with necessity. It becomes stronger because it rests upon the one foundation that remains available in every circumstance: the deliberate and honorable use of your own reason. The world will continue changing according to its nature. People will continue acting according to their understanding. Fortune will continue offering both opportunity and difficulty without asking your permission. None of these realities can prevent you from living well unless you abandon the one responsibility that has always been yours. Guard your judgment, govern your actions, release your grip on what was never yours to possess. In doing so, you discover that genuine freedom is not found in controlling the world, but in refusing to let the uncontrollable govern the quality of your own life. Number 6. Choose reason over emotion. There are moments in every life when emotion speaks with such force that it seems impossible to question. Anger demands an immediate response. Fear insists that retreat is the only safe path. Desire whispers that satisfaction cannot wait another moment. Pride convinces you that admitting error would diminish your worth. In those moments, it is easy to believe that whatever you feel must also be true. Yet the greatest mistake is not that these emotions arise. The mistake is allowing them to become rulers instead of messengers. Reason was not given to you to silence every feeling. It was given so that no feeling would govern your life without examination. A disciplined mind does not reject emotion simply because it is powerful. It asks whether the emotion points toward what is honorable or merely toward what is immediately pleasant. This distinction shapes every decision that follows. When emotion alone directs action, life becomes a series of reactions. When reason leads, every action becomes a deliberate expression of character. Think carefully about how many choices you have later regretted. Few of them were made after patient reflection. Most were made in moments when urgency disguised itself as necessity. Words spoken in anger could not be recalled. Promises made in excitement proved impossible to keep. Fear delayed opportunities that never returned. Envy damaged relationships that once brought joy. These outcomes were not created by emotion itself, but by the decision to obey emotion before consulting judgment. A life guided by reason begins with a willingness to slow the mind. The world constantly encourages immediate responses. Every disagreement invites instant defense. Every criticism tempts immediate justification. Every disappointment urges immediate complaint. Yet speed rarely produces wisdom. A brief pause often prevents consequences that years cannot repair. That pause is not hesitation born from uncertainty. It is the deliberate refusal to surrender your judgment to the loudest feeling of the moment. Begin every morning by reminding yourself that your purpose is not to chase agreeable emotions, but to cultivate a reliable character. Feelings will change throughout the day without asking your permission. Circumstances will influence your mood. Fatigue may shorten your patience. Success may tempt your pride. Unexpected setbacks may awaken frustration. None of these experiences determine the quality of your conduct unless you grant them authority over your decisions. Your task is not to predict every emotional state, but to remain committed to acting well, regardless of which emotions arise. As you move through the day, notice how frequently emotion attempts to interpret reality before reason has gathered the facts. One delayed reply becomes evidence of rejection. One mistake becomes proof of inadequacy. One disagreement becomes the end of mutual respect. Emotion naturally fills empty spaces with dramatic conclusions. Reason patiently waits for evidence before reaching judgment. The disciplined person refuses to mistake possibility for certainty. Whenever strong emotion appears, ask yourself 3 questions before acting. First, what has actually happened? Separate observable facts from personal interpretation. Second, what part of this situation depends upon my own conduct? Direct your attention toward what remains available for honorable action. Third, what response would still deserve respect if viewed tomorrow with a clear mind? These questions interrupt impulsive reactions and restore deliberate judgment. Many people fear that choosing reason means becoming distant from others. The opposite is often true. Emotional impulsiveness frequently damages trust because it produces inconsistency. One day kindness, the next resentment. One day patience, the next harshness. Others never know which version of you will appear. Reason creates steadiness. It allows people to encounter someone whose principles remain dependable even when circumstances fluctuate. Such consistency becomes the foundation of genuine respect. Pay close attention to anger because it often disguises wounded pride. There are moments when firm correction is appropriate, yet uncontrolled anger rarely serves justice. Instead, it seeks victory, humiliation, or revenge. Before speaking in anger, ask whether your purpose is to improve the situation or merely to satisfy the desire to strike back. Reason seeks what is beneficial. Anger often seeks what is immediate. The difference determines whether your words heal or deepen conflict. Fear deserves equal examination. It frequently presents imagined certainty about events that have not occurred. The mind begins predicting failure, rejection, embarrassment, or loss long before reality has spoken. If you continually obey these predictions, your life gradually becomes smaller. Opportunities disappear because imagined dangers receive greater authority than present responsibilities. Courage does not require the absence of fear. It requires refusing to let fear become the final judge of what ought to be done. Desire also asks for careful attention. Not every desire deserves fulfillment. Some strengthen character through meaningful goals. Others quietly weaken discipline by demanding constant satisfaction. Before pursuing any desire, consider whether obtaining it will increase your freedom or deepen your dependence. Anything that becomes necessary for your peace gains power over your life. Reason protects independence by refusing to confuse temporary pleasure with lasting good. One valuable practice throughout the day is to observe your inner dialogue without immediately believing it. Thoughts appear constantly, yet appearance alone does not establish truth. Some thoughts exaggerate, some simplify, some distort, others arise from old habits rather than present reality. By observing rather than instantly agreeing, you create room for careful judgment. This habit gradually transforms the quality of your decisions because it prevents impulse from disguising itself as certainty. You may discover that the greatest battles occur entirely within your own thinking. No audience witnesses them. No applause follows victory. A harsh remark invites retaliation, yet you remain measured. Anxiety urges avoidance, yet you fulfill your responsibility. Comfort suggests postponement, yet you complete the necessary task. These quiet victories rarely attract attention, but they strengthen character far more deeply than outward recognition ever could. As evening approaches, examine not only what you accomplished, but how you arrived there. Did reason remain your guide, or did changing emotions repeatedly redirect your course? Were your conversations governed by fairness or by wounded pride? Did your choices reflect enduring principles or temporary feelings? Honest reflection gradually exposes recurring patterns. Once recognized, these patterns become easier to correct. Do not become discouraged when emotions continue appearing despite your efforts. They belong to ordinary human experience. The goal is not emotional emptiness, but wise governance. Improvement is measured by increasing clarity between feeling something and acting because of it. Every occasion in which reason quietly resumes leadership strengthens your capacity for future self-command. Remember that reason is not cold calculation separated from humanity. Properly understood, it is the faculty that allows compassion without partiality, courage without recklessness, confidence without arrogance, and moderation without fear of enjoyment. It directs emotion toward worthy purposes, instead of allowing emotion to scatter your attention among every passing impulse. The person governed by emotion alone becomes predictable to circumstance. Praise creates confidence. Criticism destroys it. Comfort produces contentment. Difficulty removes it. Such dependence places inner peace entirely at the mercy of changing events. The person governed by reason discovers another kind of stability. Praise and criticism are examined before being accepted. Comfort is appreciated without becoming necessary. Hardship becomes an opportunity to practice steadiness instead of surrendering to despair. There will always be another occasion when impatience invites careless speech, when resentment seeks justification, or when fear proposes retreat. Treat each moment as another opportunity to strengthen judgment. Character is not formed through one dramatic decision, but through countless ordinary choices in which reason quietly prevails over impulse. Continue returning your attention to this discipline each day. Prepare your thinking each morning. Pause before important reactions. Examine your judgments with honesty. Review your conduct each evening without excuse or self-congratulation. Gradually, your decisions will become less dependent upon shifting emotions and more firmly rooted in thoughtful principle. A person who chooses reason over emotion does not lose the richness of human experience. Such a person gains the ability to experience life without becoming enslaved by every passing feeling. In that freedom, courage becomes steadier, justice becomes more reliable, moderation becomes natural, and wisdom begins shaping every corner of daily life. The strongest mind is not the one that never feels deeply. It is the one that feels fully while allowing reason to determine the path forward. Number 7. Strength grows through adversity. Difficulty has a way of exposing truths that comfort keeps hidden. When life moves according to your preferences, it is easy to believe your character is stronger than it really is. Patience seems effortless when nothing interrupts your plans. Courage appears unnecessary when there is nothing to fear. Moderation feels simple when temptation is absent. It is only when life refuses to cooperate that your principles are tested. Adversity does not arrive to reveal the world's opinion of you. It reveals your own habits of thought and the condition of your character. Many people spend years trying to eliminate every hardship from their lives, believing that peace depends upon favorable circumstances. Yet a life protected from every challenge also removes many opportunities for growth. Character develops through use. Just as physical strength increases by carrying resistance rather than avoiding it, moral strength matures when reason remains steady under pressure. The purpose of difficulty is not to defeat you. Its value lies in showing where your discipline is incomplete and where further practice is needed. The first mistake the mind often makes is treating hardship as something unnatural. The moment disappointment appears, the question immediately becomes, why is this happening to me? That question quietly assumes life owes you uninterrupted comfort. A wiser question asks, what part of my character is being called into action now? This shift changes everything. Instead of viewing adversity as an enemy, you begin seeing it as material from which wisdom, courage, patience, and self-command may be formed. Consider how quickly the mind invents unnecessary burdens during difficult times. A single setback becomes evidence that nothing will improve. One failure convinces you that future effort is pointless. A season of uncertainty persuades you that stability will never return. These conclusions rarely arise from facts. They arise from judgments formed before careful examination. The disciplined person refuses to grant permanent meaning to temporary events. Present circumstances deserve honest attention, not exaggerated conclusions. Each morning, prepare yourself for the possibility that the day may unfold differently than you hope. This preparation is not pessimism. It is an acknowledgement that circumstances remain beyond complete personal control. Resolve in advance that inconvenience will not persuade you to abandon fairness, that criticism will not separate you from honesty, and that unexpected hardship will not become permission to neglect your responsibilities. By preparing your principles before challenges appear, you reduce the influence of surprise upon your judgment. As difficulties arise, direct your attention toward the one question that remains fully available: what action belongs to me now? The mind often prefers distant worries over immediate responsibilities because imagining the future feels easier than fulfilling today's duty. Yet strength is never developed through endless speculation. It grows through faithful action in the present moment. Complete the work before you. Speak truthfully. Remain just. Accept temporary discomfort without complaint. Each of these choices strengthens character more than wishing for easier conditions ever could. Notice how adversity reveals hidden attachments. When plans collapse, you discover whether your peace depended upon success. When criticism arrives, you learn whether your self-respect depended upon praise. When comfort disappears, you see whether your contentment depended upon convenience. Hardship exposes the places where external conditions have quietly become necessities within your thinking. Once these attachments become visible, they can finally be examined and gradually released. There is an important distinction between pain and corruption of character. Pain belongs to ordinary human experience. Every person encounters disappointment, uncertainty, illness, fatigue, and loss. These experiences do not automatically diminish your integrity. Corruption begins only when difficulty persuades you to abandon what you know is right. Dishonesty adopted for convenience, resentment nourished through repeated attention, cowardice disguised as caution, or injustice committed in pursuit of personal advantage. These are genuine losses because they belong to your own choices. Guard against these far more carefully than against discomfort itself. Do not measure the value of adversity by how pleasant it feels. Measure it by what it allows you to practice. Patience cannot exist where nothing requires waiting. Forgiveness cannot exist where no offense has occurred. Courage cannot exist where no uncertainty must be faced. Self-restraint cannot exist where no temptation appears. The very experiences you would most eagerly remove from life often provide the only conditions under which these qualities become real. One useful habit is to examine each challenge before assigning meaning to it. Instead of immediately labeling an event as either fortunate or disastrous, acknowledge that its full significance has not yet been revealed. Human understanding remains limited. Situations that first appear harmful sometimes redirect your efforts toward greater wisdom. Circumstances initially welcomed as success occasionally cultivate complacency or pride. By delaying judgment, you preserve clarity and avoid unnecessary emotional extremes. Throughout the day, remain attentive to your language. Listen carefully whenever you begin saying that you cannot endure a particular inconvenience. Such statements often reflect habit rather than truth. You have already endured many situations once thought impossible. The mind frequently underestimates its capacity because it confuses discomfort with impossibility. Replace dramatic conclusions with accurate observation. Difficulty may be present, but presence alone does not establish defeat. Another valuable practice is voluntary simplicity. Periodically choose conditions that require patience, restraint, or endurance, even when easier alternatives exist. This is not an attempt to seek suffering for its own sake. It is training the mind to recognize that contentment does not depend upon constant ease. A person who occasionally practices doing without unnecessary comforts becomes less fearful when circumstances unexpectedly remove them. Independence grows wherever unnecessary dependence declines. Do not become resentful toward obstacles that reveal your weaknesses. Hidden weaknesses remain dangerous because they escape correction. Visible weaknesses can become the starting point for improvement. If impatience repeatedly appears during delays, then patience deserves focused practice. If fear repeatedly interrupts worthwhile action, courage requires deliberate cultivation. Every recurring difficulty points toward a corresponding virtue waiting to be strengthened. As evening approaches, review not merely the events of the day, but your conduct within them. Did adversity provoke complaint or encourage reflection? Did difficulty weaken your commitment to honorable action, or did it reveal opportunities to practice steadiness? Were your responses guided by principle or by immediate frustration? Such examination gradually transforms hardship from something merely endured into something deeply instructive. It is also important to remember that strength develops gradually. Character rarely changes through one dramatic event. More often, it is shaped through repeated encounters with ordinary inconveniences handled well, waiting without irritation, accepting correction without defensiveness. Continuing meaningful work despite discouragement, remaining truthful when deception appears easier. These seemingly modest victories accumulate until the person who once reacted impulsively becomes someone recognized for reliability and calm judgment. Do not envy those whose lives appear free from difficulty. External appearances reveal very little about the condition of character. The person surrounded by comfort may never have examined whether comfort governs every decision. The person praised by many may quietly depend upon approval for every sense of worth. Visible ease often conceals invisible dependence. True strength belongs to the individual whose peace remains rooted in principles rather than changing circumstances. When hardship enters your life, resist the temptation to ask only when it will end. Ask instead how you intend to meet it while it remains. Time eventually changes every circumstance, but your conduct during that time shapes your character permanently. Waiting passively for conditions to improve postpones the work that can begin today. Every challenge contains some opportunity for justice, moderation, courage, wisdom, or perseverance. Direct your attention there. There will be days when your efforts seem unnoticed and your progress appears slow. Continue anyway. Virtue does not depend upon recognition. The value of disciplined action lies within the action itself. Whether others acknowledge your patience or overlook it entirely changes nothing about its worth. Whether courage receives applause or silence does not alter its excellence. Continue choosing what is honorable, because your character, not public opinion, remains the true measure of your life. Eventually, you begin noticing a quiet transformation. The circumstances that once disturbed you lose much of their influence. Delays become occasions for patience rather than irritation. Uncertainty becomes an invitation to exercise courage rather than fear. Criticism becomes material for honest self-examination instead of immediate resentment. This change does not occur because life has become easier. It occurs because your judgments have become stronger. Strength is not proven by avoiding hardship. It is demonstrated by meeting hardship without surrendering your principles. The strongest person is not the one who experiences the fewest trials, but the one who consistently allows reason to govern conduct, even when trials appear. Every difficulty offers this opportunity. Every challenge asks the same question: will you allow circumstances to shape your character, or will you allow your character to shape your response? Return to this discipline every day. Prepare your mind before challenges arrive. Examine your judgments while difficulties unfold. Review your conduct after each day concludes. Gradually, you will discover that adversity is no longer something merely to survive. It becomes one of the greatest teachers available, revealing where growth is still possible and proving that genuine strength is built from repeated acts of reason, integrity, and steadfast commitment to what is right. Number 8. Silence weakens foolish reactions. Silence is not weakness. Silence is discipline. Silence is the space in which a foolish reaction loses its power to drag you into a life you did not choose. Most people speak the moment they feel an irritation, and because they speak too quickly, they later have to live with words that exposed their character before their reason had time to govern it. They call this honesty, but it is often only impulsiveness dressed in familiar clothing. A mind that has not learned restraint rushes outward at every sting. It answers sharpness with sharpness, insult with insult, suspicion with accusation, and discomfort with complaint. Then it wonders why its relationships are unstable, why its peace is fragile, and why other people seem to have so much control over its inner state. The answer is plain. A tongue that obeys every impulse hands authority to the very thing that should be examined first. You do not become wiser by speaking without pause. You become merely louder. Loudness is not strength. Volume is not judgment. A person can fill a room with noise and still remain governed by weakness. The disciplined person knows that words are instruments, not reflexes. Words should be chosen, not spilled. They should serve truth, not appetite. They should preserve justice, not satisfy the temporary itch to react. Each time you remain quiet long enough to see what impression is trying to seize you, you recover a part of yourself that reaction would have stolen. Silence becomes a kind of clearing. In that clearing, reason can step forward. Without it, impulse speaks first and reason is left to clean up the damage. Pay attention to the speed at which foolish reactions arise. Someone interrupts you and irritation appears. Someone misunderstands you and pride rises. Someone criticizes you and immediately the mind prepares a defense before the criticism has even been weighed. Someone fails to meet your expectation and complaint begins arranging itself into speech. The problem is not merely that these responses come quickly. The deeper problem is that you have trained yourself to trust them because they feel immediate and familiar. Yet what is familiar is not always true, and what arrives first is not always worthy of obedience. Silence interrupts this habit. Silence gives the mind time to separate fact from fantasy, injury from insult, and inconvenience from genuine harm. The undisciplined person fears silence because silence exposes the inner noise that habit tries to conceal. In quiet, he can no longer pretend that every reaction is justified. In quiet, he hears how much of his speech is borrowed from vanity, impatience, resentment, and the need to be seen as correct. In quiet, he discovers whether he speaks to communicate or to dominate. Many speak because they cannot endure being unseen, unchallenged, or unvalidated for even a moment. Their words become a way of pressing themselves into the world. But a noble mind does not need to announce its presence at every turn. It understands that self-command is often proven more clearly by what is withheld than by what is declared. Begin the day by preparing for this discipline before the day has a chance to provoke you. Before you enter the noise of other people's demands, decide that you will not hand your voice to every passing emotion. Resolve that you will not answer every remark immediately, nor justify yourself at the first sign of misunderstanding, nor pour out complaint simply because inconvenience has appeared. This decision is not about becoming cold, it is about becoming deliberate. A deliberate person can still speak firmly, still correct error, still defend what is just. The difference is that his words arise from judgment rather than from wounded impulse. When something happens that stirs you, first notice the body. The jaw tightens, the chest heats, the breath shortens, the pulse rises. These are signals, not commands. They inform you that an impression has entered the mind with force. They do not tell you that the impression is true, nor do they require immediate speech. Learn to respect this moment of recognition. Say inwardly, "This is merely an impression. It has not yet become my judgment." That sentence may appear small, but it is the beginning of freedom. The moment between feeling and response is where foolishness can be prevented. Many of the worst things people say were spoken in defense of a self that did not need defending. Pride often turns conversation into combat. Someone offers correction, and the mind hears humiliation. Someone disagrees, and the mind hears threat. Someone succeeds, and the mind hears comparison. Then words emerge too quickly, and the damage begins. Silence weakens this whole machinery. It deprives pride of fuel. It prevents the first flare of vanity from becoming a lasting conflict. It gives you the chance to ask whether your response would be useful tomorrow, when the heat has passed and reason can be seen again in full light. If the answer is no, the wiser path is to remain still. You will notice that silence also reveals how much of your speech is driven by the need to control what cannot be controlled. People try to persuade, pressure, insist, repeat, argue, and dramatize as though forceful language could bend reality to their wishes. Yet not everything yields to speech. Not every disagreement can be settled immediately. Not every problem needs your commentary. Not every silence requires filling. Often, the better path is to let events unfold while you guard your own conduct. The more you try to command what is outside your authority, the more exhausted and frustrated you become. Silence returns your attention to what actually belongs to you, your interpretation, your choice, your manner, your discipline. This does not mean you should never speak. It means you should learn the difference between necessary speech and reactive speech. Necessary speech serves truth, justice, and duty. Reactive speech serves the wounded ego, the restless mood, or the desire to discharge tension quickly. One strengthens character, the other weakens it. Ask yourself before speaking, does this need to be said? Does it need to be said now? And does it need to be said by me in this form? These questions are not decorations, they are guards at the gate. They keep the mind from making a habit of useless reaction. Silence is particularly powerful when you are tempted to complain. Complain often masquerades as release, but it usually deepens attachment to what is missing, delayed, or unfair. Each complaint teaches the mind to dwell on lack. Each repeated grievance strengthens the belief that your peace depends on circumstances being different. Silence cuts off this pattern. It does not deny that difficulty is present. It simply refuses to feed difficulty with exaggerated speech. The disciplined person may notice what is wrong, may act to correct what can be corrected, and may endure what must be endured, but he does not indulge in the luxury of endless lamentation. Complaining is easy, correction is harder. Correction is the path worth taking. A quiet tongue also protects your relationships. Many bonds are damaged not by grand betrayals, but by small, careless reactions repeated over time. A cutting remark here, a sarcastic reply there, an unnecessary correction spoken too quickly, an offended answer offered without thought. Over days and years, such habits wear down trust. Silence interrupts the cycle before it matures into a pattern of harm. By withholding the first unkind reaction, you give yourself time to choose a more just one. By delaying your answer, you allow space for understanding to grow. By refusing to speak merely to win, you preserve the dignity of both people. This is not softness. It is disciplined fairness. There is also a deeper reason silence matters. Every unnecessary reaction scatters the mind. Every impulsive answer gives your attention away to whatever disturbed you. Over time, the soul becomes fragmented, always following whatever shines brightest or hurts most at the moment. Silence gathers the soul back together. It teaches the mind to remain with itself instead of being constantly pulled outward by disturbance. In that gathered state, you can see your own judgments clearly. You can detect the point where irritation entered. You can notice the moment fear disguised itself as caution or pride disguised itself as righteousness. Without silence, these movements pass unnoticed. With silence, they can be examined and corrected. Practice this today in the smallest matters. Do not answer the first provocation at once. Let a few breaths pass. Let the thought mature before it becomes speech. If someone asks a question that stirs irritation, answer more slowly than your emotion prefers. If a task frustrates you, do not curse it aloud in the instant of annoyance. If another person speaks foolishly, do not assume your first sharp answer will improve the situation. Often it will only reveal that you have surrendered to the same folly you condemn. Better to remain quiet than to multiply disorder. Better to withhold the unworthy answer than to regret a sentence that cannot be recalled. In the evening, review not only what you said, but what you almost said. That is where much of your training is revealed. Did you resist the urge to react quickly, or did you permit irritation to move through your mouth before reason had time to stand? Did silence protect your judgment, or did you use speech to disguise impatience? Did your words heal, clarify, and strengthen, or did they merely vent pressure? Honest review of these questions builds a sharper conscience. You begin to see how often silence would have been the more powerful act. Do not confuse silence with passivity. The silent mind is not empty of principle. It is full of restraint, clarity, and readiness. It can speak when truth requires it and remain still when vanity demands too much. It can correct without cruelty and disagree without agitation. It can endure the discomfort of not replying immediately because it knows that not every moment belongs to impulse. This is the form of strength that the restless person never understands. He thinks strength means always having something to say. In reality, strength often appears as the refusal to say what would weaken one's character. The mind trained in silence becomes harder to provoke because it is no longer desperate to answer every disturbance at once. It learns that time is often the ally of wisdom. What seemed urgent now may seem trivial after a brief pause. What felt insulting may prove insignificant once examined. What appeared unbearable may require only patience and steady conduct. Silence gives reality room to be seen more accurately. Reaction obscures, quiet reveals. So when foolish reaction rises, do not worship its urgency. Let it be what it is, a movement of the lower habit, not the voice of your true authority. Stand back from it. Refuse to speak before you have understood. Refuse to complain before you have distinguished fact from feeling. Refuse to let pride, fear, or irritation borrow your tongue. The more faithfully you practice this, the more your words will come from reason rather than impulse, and the less often you will need to repair the damage of speaking too soon. This is the discipline. Guard the entrance. Let silence stand watch before your mouth. Let reason have the first word within you, and only then permit speech if speech is needed. In that practice, foolish reactions weaken. In that practice, inner freedom grows. In that practice, you stop being carried by every impulse that rises in the moment, and you begin to live as someone who owns his response instead of being owned by it. Number 9. Rule yourself before others. You often try to govern the world around you before you have learned to govern the mind that is doing the governing. You want order in circumstances, respect from others, cooperation from life itself, yet inside your own thinking there is disorder, contradiction, impulse, and unexamined judgment. This is why effort in the external world so often feels heavy and unstable. A mind that is not ruled cannot produce steady action. Before you attempt to guide anything outside yourself, you must first face the condition of your own inner direction. The real question is not how well you manage others, but whether you are able to manage yourself when no one is watching and nothing forces you to behave with restraint. Most suffering does not begin with events. It begins with interpretation. You receive an impression, immediately attach meaning to it, and then treat that meaning as if it were reality itself. Someone disagrees with you, and you interpret it as disrespect. Something does not go your way, and you interpret it as injustice. Someone else succeeds, and you interpret it as your own failure. These interpretations arise faster than reflection, and because they are not examined, they quietly become the basis of your emotional life. If your judgments are untrained, your reactions will always be unstable. A person governed by untested impressions cannot guide anything with clarity. You may notice how often your attention is directed outward, toward correcting, persuading, or managing the behavior of others. Yet the same attention is rarely directed inward with equal seriousness. It is easier to notice the faults in another person's conduct than to examine the instability of your own responses. It is easier to criticize external disorder than to confront internal disorder. But no lasting improvement begins outside. Everything begins with the quality of your own judgment. Until that is examined, all external correction becomes incomplete and fragile. To rule yourself means to place your judgments under deliberate inspection before they become actions. It means refusing to accept every impulse as instruction. It means recognizing that a thought appearing in your mind is not a command, but a claim that must be evaluated. When anger rises, it is not yet authority. When fear appears, it is not yet truth. When desire presses forward, it is not yet wisdom. Each must pass through the discipline of reason before it is allowed to shape your behavior. Without this inner governance, you remain subject to forces within you that do not care about your long-term well-being. Begin each morning by observing the condition of your mind before engaging with the world. Notice what expectations are already forming, what desires are already active, what worries are already rehearsing future scenarios. Do not immediately obey them. Instead, remind yourself that the day will bring situations you cannot predict, and your task is not to control those situations, but to maintain clarity within them. Decide in advance that no event will be allowed to govern your character. This decision is not about predicting the day correctly. It is about establishing who will be in charge of your response when unpredictability arrives. Throughout the day, you will encounter moments where you feel the urge to react quickly. A comment may disturb you, a delay may irritate you, a mistake may frustrate you, a person may act in a way you did not expect. In each of these moments, the initial movement of the mind is to project judgment outward. Yet this projection hides something important. Before the situation can influence your behavior, your interpretation has already done so. If your interpretation is uncontrolled, your reaction will be uncontrolled. If your interpretation is examined, your reaction can be chosen. Self-rule requires this interruption of automatic judgment. You must learn to pause at the level of meaning, not just at the level of action. Ask yourself whether what you are thinking is a fact or an assumption. Ask whether your interpretation is necessary or merely habitual. Ask whether the emotion you feel is guiding you toward clarity or pulling you toward exaggeration. This questioning does not remove emotion. It places emotion under examination so that it does not become mistaken for truth. One of the greatest illusions is the belief that controlling others will produce inner stability. You may attempt to direct conversations, influence outcomes, or shape behavior, believing that external order will create internal peace. Yet even if the world temporarily obeyed your expectations, your mind would still generate new demands. This is because unrest is not primarily caused by external events, but by unexamined desires. When desires are not governed internally, no amount of external adjustment will bring lasting calm. The mind that has not learnt restraint will always find something else to disturb it. The foundation of ruling yourself is recognizing what belongs to you and what does not. Your judgments belong to you. Your intentions belong to you. Your choices belong to you. Your effort belongs to you. Everything else, including the responses of others, the outcome of events, and the direction of circumstances, lies outside complete control. Confusion between these two domains creates constant frustration. When you attempt to govern what is not yours, you neglect what is. When you neglect what is yours, you feel powerless even in situations where you actually possess full authority over your response. Watch how often dissatisfaction arises not from events themselves, but from expectations about how events should behave. You expect others to act according to your standards, situations to unfold according to your plans, and outcomes to align with your preferences. When reality diverges from these expectations, frustration appears. Yet the problem is not reality. The problem is the assumption that reality owes compliance to your desires. Once this assumption is questioned, much unnecessary tension begins to dissolve. Ruling yourself also requires honesty about your weaknesses. Many people avoid this honesty because it feels uncomfortable to admit inconsistency, impatience, or dependence on approval. Yet without clear recognition of these patterns, no genuine correction is possible. You cannot govern what you refuse to see. Observe where you are most easily disturbed. Observe where your reactions are strongest. These are not signs of failure, but indicators of where discipline is most needed. Awareness is not punishment. It is the beginning of mastery. There is a quiet strength in choosing restraint when impulse demands immediate expression. When you feel compelled to respond sharply, pause instead. When you feel compelled to defend yourself immediately, examine whether defense is even necessary. When you feel compelled to pursue comfort at the expense of responsibility, question whether that choice strengthens or weakens your character. Each moment of restraint is a small act of governance over the inner world. Repeated often enough, these moments become the foundation of self-rule. Do not confuse self-rule with suppression. It is not the denial of thought or feeling. It is the proper ordering of them. Thoughts arise, but they do not command action without examination. Emotions appear, but they do not define truth without reflection. Desires emerge, but they do not automatically determine behavior. In this ordering, reason serves as the governing principle, not by force, but by clarity. It evaluates, distinguishes, and directs. As evening arrives, examine the direction your mind followed throughout the day. Where did you allow interpretation to go unchallenged? Where did reaction replace judgment? Where did external circumstances gain authority over your inner state? This review is not about guilt, it is about precision. You are learning to recognize the exact moments where self-governance weakened so that tomorrow it can be strengthened. Over time, you will notice a shift. Situations that once immediately triggered reaction will begin to feel less controlling. You will see that between stimulus and response there is space, and within that space lies your true authority. You are not free because nothing affects you. You are free because you can choose your response to what affects you. That ability is the beginning of ruling yourself, and when you learn to rule yourself, the need to dominate external life begins to fade, not because you stop caring about what happens, but because you stop confusing control with peace. External events will continue to shift without your permission, but your inner direction will no longer shift with them. In that steadiness, you discover that the highest form of governance was never over others or circumstances, but over the judgment that shapes your entire experience of life. Number 10. Peace begins within your mind. You have spent so much time searching for peace in places that cannot hold it. You have looked for it in circumstances, in people, in outcomes, in approval, in comfort, in the absence of difficulty. Yet every time life changes, your peace changes with it. This is the first misunderstanding that keeps you restless. You treat peace as something that must be delivered to you by the outside world, when in truth the outside world has never been capable of such a task. Everything external is unstable by nature. If your inner state depends on it, then instability becomes unavoidable. Peace does not begin in what happens to you. It begins in how you interpret what happens. Two people can experience the same event and walk away with entirely different states of mind. One is disturbed, the other remains steady. The event itself did not contain peace or disturbance. The difference was in judgment. This is where your attention has been misplaced for so long. You have tried to control outcomes instead of examining the judgments you place upon them. Those judgments are where your suffering is created. Most inner disturbance is not caused by reality itself, but by resistance to reality. You form expectations about how life should unfold, how people should behave, how situations should resolve, and how quickly comfort should return. When reality does not match these expectations, frustration appears. Yet what you are experiencing is not injustice from life. It is the collision between what is and what you insisted must be. The mind that argues with reality loses peace before the argument even begins. Begin to observe how quickly your thinking transforms simple events into emotional disturbances. A delay becomes irritation, a disagreement becomes personal offense, a mistake becomes self-criticism, a change of plan becomes anxiety. None of these reactions exist in the event itself. They are added afterward by interpretation. If interpretation is uncontrolled, peace becomes impossible. If interpretation is examined, peace becomes available again. Each morning, before the world enters your attention, set your mind in order. Do not begin the day by chasing tasks or reacting to imagined problems. Begin by reminding yourself that your peace will not be determined by what happens, but by how you respond to what happens. Decide in advance that no external event will be allowed to dictate your inner condition. This is not a prediction that the day will be easy. It is a commitment that your conduct will remain governed by reason regardless of difficulty. As the day unfolds, you will encounter moments that test this commitment. Someone may speak in a way you did not expect. Something may fail to go according to plan. You may be misunderstood, delayed, interrupted, or challenged. In each of these moments, the mind will attempt to move immediately toward judgment. It will try to assign meaning before clarity has been established. This is where peace is either preserved or lost. The disciplined mind interrupts this automatic movement and examines the judgment before accepting it. Ask yourself whether what you are reacting to is a fact or an interpretation. Facts are neutral. Interpretations carry emotional weight. The fact may be that someone disagreed with you. The interpretation may be that you are disrespected. The fact may be that something did not proceed as planned. The interpretation may be that the day is ruined. When you separate these layers, much of the disturbance loses its foundation. What remains is often far less threatening than the mind first suggested. Peace grows stronger when you clearly distinguish between what is within your control and what is not. Your judgments, your choices, your attention, and your actions belong to you. The behavior of others, the unfolding of events, and the outcome of efforts do not. When you attempt to secure peace by controlling what is not yours, you create constant tension. When you place your focus on what is yours, peace becomes possible even in unstable conditions. Notice how often your mind travels away from the present moment in search of imagined futures or unresolved pasts. It rehearses outcomes that have not occurred or revisits events that cannot be changed. In both cases, attention leaves what is real and moves into what is not under direct influence. Peace cannot exist in a mind that is constantly elsewhere. Bring attention back to what is actually happening now. Not what might happen, not what should have happened, but what is here in front of you at this moment. There is also a quieter source of disturbance that often goes unnoticed. It is the need for things to be different in order for you to feel okay. This subtle demand places conditions on peace. It suggests that peace will arrive only when circumstances improve. Yet this expectation keeps peace perpetually delayed. If peace depends on external perfection, it will never arrive, because external conditions are never fully stable. Remove this condition, and peace becomes something you practice, rather than something you wait for. When discomfort arises, do not immediately interpret it as a sign that something has gone wrong. Discomfort is often simply the mind encountering resistance to change, uncertainty, or limitation. The presence of discomfort does not automatically indicate harm. It only indicates experience. The interpretation you attach to it determines whether it becomes suffering. If you interpret discomfort as unbearable or unjust, suffering increases. If you interpret it as temporary and manageable, peace remains more accessible. Throughout the day, practice observing your emotional responses without immediately obeying them. An emotion may arise, but it does not yet require action. There is a space between feeling and response where clarity can return. In that space, ask what judgment is driving the emotion. Often the emotion is not caused by the event itself, but by the meaning you assigned to it. When the meaning is examined, the emotional intensity often changes. Peace is strengthened every time you choose not to escalate a disturbance. Many moments in daily life offer the opportunity to either amplify tension or allow it to pass. A careless remark can be answered with restraint instead of escalation. A frustration can be acknowledged without turning into complaint. A disappointment can be observed without turning into resentment. Each time you choose non-escalation, you are training the mind to remain steady rather than reactive. Evening reflection is essential for understanding the state of your inner world. Review not only what happened, but how you experienced what happened. Where did your judgments remain clear, and where did they become distorted? Where did you allow immediate reaction to replace thoughtful response? Where did expectation override acceptance? This reflection is not about judgment against yourself, but about increasing awareness of how your peace was influenced throughout the day. You will begin to notice patterns. Certain situations repeatedly disturb you, not because they are inherently harmful, but because they trigger familiar interpretations. These patterns are not permanent. They are habits of perception. And habits can be changed through repetition of a different response. Each time you interrupt a habitual reaction and replace it with examined judgment, you weaken the pattern that produces disturbance. Over time, something subtle begins to change. External events still occur, but they lose their authority over your inner condition. The mind becomes less dependent on favorable circumstances to remain steady. You no longer interpret every inconvenience as disruption of peace. Instead, you recognize that peace was never located in circumstances to begin with. It was always available in the quality of your judgment. True peace is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of clear thinking within difficulty. It is the ability to remain aligned with reason while circumstances shift. It is the refusal to surrender inner stability to external instability. When you understand this, you stop searching for peace as something to obtain and begin practicing it as something to maintain. In the end, peace begins where it has always been available, within the way you think. Not in what you receive, not in what you avoid, not in what you control outside yourself, but in the disciplined governance of your own mind. When judgment becomes clear, peace is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you return to, again and again, through every moment of life.